Today, I thought I could share with you the 7 things I wish I'd known before I started buying properties. Hi, my name is Tony Daw from Your First 4 Houses, and my channel is all about helping you replace a job-based income with just a few properties so you can give up the day job if you wish and go and do something more interesting with your life. If this is your first time here, be sure to subscribe to the channel and click that bell notification icon so that you don't miss out on any of the free content that I give you each and every week. So I wanted to share these 7 things I just wish I'd known before I started investing in property, because I honestly think they're going to help you. So the first of these tips is simply: a cheap property doesn't mean it's a good deal. And believe me, I've made this mistake before. You see, there are some things that you can fix if you're buying a cheap property. So for example, if it's in generally poor condition, do you know what? You can probably fix that. If it needs underpinning, you can probably fix that. If it's got Japanese knotweed in the garden, you can probably fix that. It's probably still going to make sense to buy that property. But there are some things that you simply can't fix. So if it's a cheap property but it's got an electricity pylon in the garden, you can't fix that. If it's on a floodplain, you can't fix that. If it's in a bad or declining neighbourhood, you obviously really can't do anything about that. So just because it's cheap, it doesn't mean you should automatically buy it. It's not automatically a great deal. This is a business decision, and you should always be willing to walk away. My second thing is you should treat flipping and buying and holding type properties completely separately, and I would strongly advise you to speak to your accountant or tax advisor regarding this one thing. Pick up the phone, give them a call, pay for the advice. Although I can't give you any tax advice, I know that what they've got to say to you will make a lot of sense. The third thing is that you should always consider the work begins before you buy that property. So don't wait until you've bought it before you start to think about and move forwards on the refurb. You need to get detailed measurements, I would suggest, before you exchange on the property. Go and buy yourself a laser tape measure. I've got about 3 that I generally keep on me or around me, and go on site and take loads of really good measurements of all the rooms. I then use SketchUp. I love SketchUp to actually construct a model, and I can do that really quite quickly. You can actually employ people to do this for next to no money, by the way, just outsource that job. But then you've got an actual model of the house, and if you're conducting a complete refurb, this really helps. Start the planning process really early on, and as I say, this is before you've actually exchanged contracts. Start thinking about the materials that you're actually going to bring in to do the refurb, but don't buy them. Obviously not until you've actually exchanged. Start reaching out to and lining up all of the various different trades and subcontractors that you're going to be using. You see, every day that the property is empty, it's costing you money. Or to put it another way, how would you feel about taking £50 every single day and go and sticking it on the fire? It doesn't make sense, does it? So start taking action before you bought the property. The fourth one is to create a detailed scope of work. Now, you can do all of this before you actually buy the property, and you absolutely should be, exchange on the property, I mean. But if you have a period between exchange and completion and you haven't been able to get in there before you've exchanged, you absolutely should get in there the day after exchange if you can. Get that laser tape measure out, start taking detailed notes, and create yourself a detailed scope of work. You see, this is your roadmap. It's the thing that you and all your subcontractors are going to follow when they're carrying out all of the work. It reduces the gaps which notoriously tend to seep into a refurb where there's no work actually going on in the property. So you might have an electrician in on day 1, then day 2 and day 3 nothing happens, and then somebody rolls up on day 4 and 5 and so on. You don't want those gaps, because don't forget, every gap you're putting £50 on the fire. The more detail you can put into this thing, the better. Now, you're going to make loads of mistakes when you make your first one, but honestly, you just need to make notes on what everything is costing you, what you're doing, because you'll learn so much from putting one of these things together for the next one. The fifth one is to consider this. You make money when you buy. in one of three different ways. The first is you can absolutely buy properties genuinely below market value, and I've done it many times, and people are often quite surprised at how far below market value I've been able to purchase properties, but always making sure, believe it or not, that I'm putting the seller's interests ahead of my own. They come first, always, from my point of view, absolutely. And then obviously also then secondarily needs to be a great deal for me. Buy below market value. The second way is to add massive value, and I talk about this a lot. And the third way is to use a creative strategy to put together a win-win for the seller. Now, I've done an entire mini course on this. You might want to check this out. It will really help you understand the basics of what I'm trying to sort of cover here. You need to get very good with the numbers. You need to calculate on a regular basis, on a daily basis, a deal. Work out what the return on investment is going to be on that deal. Practice, practice, practice. You need to get good at the numbers. The sixth tip here is to find and hold the very best of subcontractors. Now, I've been very fortunate over the years, I guess maybe because I was a contractor myself. I was originally a kitchen fitter, wasn't I? Way back in the day. I've always been able to kind of get on really well with contractors because I kind of understand what they need. And by the way, it's always a cup of tea. But you need to really look after your subcontractors, get the best and hold on to them for the long term. I always think you should get 3 quotations whenever you're doing any work. And that's 3 actual quotations. That's not making 3 phone calls and only 2 contractors turn up on site to actually put together a quote. Maybe make 4 or 5 phone calls to get 3 actual quotations. Obviously, you need to pay immediately that the work is done. This is about looking after your subcontractors because you want to use them on the next job. And if you dilly-dally with the payment, assuming they've done a good job, do you know what? They're not going to pick up the phone next time you ring. I always like to invite my subcontractors back onto the job after it's all finished, because maybe they were doing the carpentry bit, but they haven't seen the whole property finished, and make sure you've got some beers ready to give them. A great tip for finding good subcontractors is to use Checkatrade. Checkatrade is awesome. This is not sponsored by Checkatrade, by the way. It's awesome because if they put themselves out onto Checkatrade, they honestly can't afford to mess you around, because what's the first thing you're going to do? You're going to go and put a negative comment on Checkatrade. And having been a Checkatrade member before, I know for a fact it's almost impossible to remove any comments. So they're going to look after you. Now, I've got a series of videos coming up on exactly how to find and keep the best subcontractors, so maybe keep an eye out for that. And if it's a week or so down the line, hopefully I'll put the link up here for you. The 7th tip is refurbishing a property is always going to be more expensive than you think. Trust me on that. But I would encourage you on the first one to be very hands-on. Get on site, start doing all the sweeping up, start doing all the labouring, messing around on site. Don't get in your subcontractor's way, because you're only going to piss them off, to be perfectly honest with you. Just be a friendly, smiling face on site and you will learn so much. I think you should factor in a buffer when you're doing any kind of work, because as I said, it's always going to be more expensive than you think. Maybe that's just in terms of delays or a few additions here, there and everywhere, so factor in a buffer. And lastly, like me, be very pessimistic about everything, and in particular, be very pessimistic about your numbers. I honestly think that's a healthy position to come from. Always assume that everything is going to cost you more than you think it's going to.